What was after 47?
85.
85. Okay.
29, 25, 39.
Oh, hold on. Let me do that one more time.
29, 25, 39.
Okay.
And 45, 35, 30.
Okay. It's just 5?
Yes.
Okay. Cool, and that's actually in that boundary. So if you just to kind of orient you, if you open it up, I've got this boundary object turned on. It's for later. It's just so to get your bearings, because if I turn it off right now, there's nothing in that model right now. So I've just got it in there so you don't think you're lost in space. But we're actually going to use that later on. So I've got my points.
So for points out of that boundary, we're still okay, right?
What's that? Yeah. So if you look on the handout, it's down on the list there. But the boundary is just a placeholder. I'm just using it as a placeholder. You guys can build your own boundary. That's going to be better. We're going to use it just to cut off those extension lines. That's all. And if you do it right, it'll be ready for your drawing. If you do a cube, it'll help you align all 6 of your projections in Illustrator really quickly. And so we asked if you do it a cube that way. But I just put it there as a placeholder so you know roughly what it is. I mean, it was luck. It was not luck, but it just happened that his is already in there. This is probably a little big. I'd probably center it around here based on. Well, we'll talk about that too. So I'm going to turn that off. So I've got my points, right? Let's make sure. Recording. Doesn't look like I am. Must have closed it out. Or it's running. I'm not sure what's going on. Still recording, just disappeared. Okay, I'll edit it out how dumb I look on that video. Okay, so I've got my points. They're on the right layer. I'm going to go, and the next step it says, make sure I don't skip the steps in here. And I'm going to create the points. I've done that. Step 2, done. Step 1's already done. I'm going to connect the splines. So I've got my points, and I'm going to change it, my layer to the uniform layer. And those layers are corresponding to what type of curve I'm going to run through there. So the command that we use for that is called curve through points. It's written down there, but it's also if you right click the curve button, the little U there, and I can go in here and get it under curve, freeform curve through points. So fit to points. Select points to build curve through. I'm going to select my points there and hit enter. So this is just giving me a preview based on whatever my previous settings were. I know that I'm going to change my degree, so I'm going to change my degree to 3. All R's are going to be 3, and I also know interpolated's fine, and I want mine to be closed, so I'm going to change it to closed. So that's what the closed one looks like, right? This is actually pretty nice. It's pretty dramatic, right? It's a really cool looking orbit. What's that?
Can you repeat that?
I'm going to do it 2 more times after this. So see how it's fitting through there? It's not great because I've got my selection set at yellow right now. I'm going to go into my settings here real quick and change my display just so you get a little bit more contrast. Okay, and I'm going to go my curve through points. So select my points. That's a preview. I don't have it yet because I haven't hit enter to accept it up here. Knots are uniform. I want to make sure that that's the setting for that layer. That's what's important. the reason is, and if you put on help while you're doing this, it's going to explain what's going on. But these curves are all going to have the same amount of knots, and this uniform one spaces them all evenly. So if our curve was length n, right, and we've got 5 knots, the length of each little distance between the 2 knots is going to be n over 5. It's not going to worry about the curvature at all. It's going to treat it evenly. Okay, and that's what uniform means. And there's a little bit more of an explanation in there. It's got uniform parameterization. It also is used the point spacing roughly equal. You can read that if you turn on help or watch this recording. I'm going to hit OK to accept it. And I'm going to change my layer to chord. And I'm going to right click or hit space bar to repeat the last command. I'm going to select my points again. And now I'm going to change, nothing's showing up. You can see they're kind of coterminal right now. They're kind of just showing up at the same time because my settings are the same. I'm going to change my knot option to chord. And I'll accept that. So I'll run that command again so we can take a look at the chord option. So the chord option uses the points that you picked originally. So that means if I've got more spacing happening between these 2 points, there's a little subcurve going from here to here, and there's one going here to here. So that means if I were to edit this later on, things would change more locally here because it's uniformly distributed on the red one. It kind of goes out. So that's the chord one. Chord kind of makes sense, right? It's the space between knots. That's where chord's coming from. And so I'm going to rerun the command one more time, and I'm going to change it to square root of the chord, and I'm going to change my active layer to square root of the chord down here. The square root of the chord takes the square root of the picked points, and that's how it decides to split it up. That's gonna equally distribute the length based on that number for the knot spacing. So I'm gonna hit enter to accept it, and then we've got the 3 curves that are going through the same 5 points. Right, pretty simple stuff. If you looked at these curves, and if I went here and I turned on the knot display, which is this little button here. These are not exactly knots. They're edit points between knots. So they're not the actual knots, but they're edit points that allow you to grab the knots. They're the average. But you can start to see how they show up in different spots on the curves. And the same thing with the control points. Did I get rid of my blue one by mistake? Yep, I did. Let me redo. So I'm going to hit Control Y, bring it back, and turn on my control points for all these guys. So you can see that the distribution for the control points is very different for all the curves. Let me hit escape on that. Let me check out this one. So I've got my splines, and next thing I'm going to take a look at is I'm going to actually make a control polygon. That's just going to be it's going to be the straight lengths between the points, straight line connections, and that's just as a reference that we're going to use if you were to run it straight line. So I'm actually going to just run that command again. But I'm going to change it to that layer, and I'm going to change my degree to 1. It doesn't matter what the chord amount is for that because it's just going to be on the corners. That's all it's going to be. There's not going to be a variance on that. We're calling this a controlling polygon, but it's really not that. It's just for lack of a better word. Control polygon typically is if you were to turn on your control points, or it would be the control point. Like if I turn on my control points for this object and drew a line between all those, it's like the 1 degree version of it for those control points. So let me undo that. And then we're going to look at our intersections. So this is when I can turn back on my boundary objects and kind of see what's going on. This one would certainly work because I would just run my points. And actually, this is what I did. I jumped way over. Okay. I did the chords before I was supposed to do the points. If I can do those now. So the other idea is that we mark the points, right? We want these cross marks to be later on in our drawing to denote where the points are. So I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to go to, I'm going to change my layer to my point markers, these crosses here, and I'm going to go to curve, line, single line, the start of my line, and before I touch anything, I'm going to click both sides there. Now, I started with 2 inches. It's just a placeholder for now. I just want something out there. You might have to resize it later. I'm holding down the shift button to make it orthogonally lock. And I'm going to left click and accept it. Okay.
What's the 2 inches for?
It's the length of the point to the end of that line there that I just made. So I've got this guy. I'm going to make a copy of it. This is, if you haven't used this, this is the gumball. Has anyone never used Rhino? You've used Rhino. You're a liar.
Oh, never?
Never.
Oh, sorry.
Never, ever.
Oops.
Oh boy. So we'll run through this. And then if you have any more Rhino questions I can help you with the time that we have, I will try to do like a basic introduction with the time that we have. I can't promise you a full run through, but I would like to get you enough that this becomes something that is not a obstacle for you. Okay. So, is there a question about this?
Linda.
Do I?
Yeah.
The world has many.
The Rhino website is
Yeah, I have a few as well. But we can talk about general Rhino stuff. We'll have time after this because this process is not long. So this is the gumball. I'm going to make a copy of this curve. I need 3 of them, right? 1 for each axis. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and I'm going to hit the arc to rotate. When I hold down Alt, that makes a copy. And I'm going to say 90. Oops, let me undo that for a second. I didn't hit the arc. So start rotating it, change it to that. Actually, I should tap it. There we go. So I've made a copy in that direction, and I'm going to make a copy in the vertical direction. Just holding down the Alt key and hitting the arc on there. I'm getting some kind of collision here. There we go. Doesn't want to play with my Mac keyboard. Okay. So I did it once. Not going to do it again. I'm going to take these objects and I'm going to group them. So I got to edit groups and group the objects together. And this is my point marker that I'm going to use for my other 5 points. So I'm going to do transform copy. The point that I'm going to copy from is going to be that center point. And I'm just going to make 4 more copies for my other 4 points. Those are my point markers. My point notations are a little bit more involved because as nice as they are, they're going to show us our dimensions, right? When we look at what these are. They actually exist in space. So this is an object that's flat on that plane. And if I look in another view, it has 0 dimension. It doesn't show up. They're there. It's actually right there, but I can't see it, so it's not doing me any good. So that's why we've got multiple layers for that. This is a little extra work, but what it does is it gives us something that's already oriented, and we can control it per drawing. So we don't have to find this perfect one that fits in some spot, because that's a pretty impossible thing to ask. Anyway, so let's see where my points are. Points, point cloud. So if you look at my notations, this is my right view. I've got on that layer annotations that are aligned with the right view of the drawing. Okay. The layers are already set up, and these views are already set up. When you first open Rhino, there's the top, front, right, and perspective views. The bottom, back, and left views have already been added for you. That's what these extra views are. So these are these 6 here are the 6 for your drawing. If you mess up and lose a view, you can just double click on one of these and it'll restore it. So if I was in my right view and somehow I messed up and made it another view, or I turned it into perspective or something like that, I can always go set view right, because those are part of Rhino. See how they're up there already? These other ones are not, but now they've been saved to that model that you're going to get. So I would just say, like for instance, if I by mistake set this view to the right, now I've got 2 right views, I can just make this active and double click on left here, and it'll make it the left view again. Is there a question?
So those were saved views?
Those are saved views. Yeah. They're called named views, but they're saved. Yeah. All right. And if you don't see them, there's a little options gear right there. You click that and you check named views, and they'll pop up for you. Okay. So let's do my top one first. I'm going to go to my top view. I'm going to go on my top layer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my active layer to point notations top view, and I'm going to do my annotations for that. So the annotation tool we're going to use is analyze, and it is point. So when you first run that command, it's going to say points to evaluate, and it says label equals off. I'm going to change that to on. It says style equals dot. I'm going to change that to annotation, and I'm making changes just by clicking on it. So now it says style leader, and I'm going to snap to my point. I want to make sure I'm snapping to the point and not anything else. So I'm going to go up into my snaps here and right click point. It'll make it the only active snap. It'll ignore everything else. So point to evaluate. It's going to look at our point, and it's going to, when I left click on that point, it's going to give me a leader with the numbers. So then I just have to repeat that process. I'm just right clicking and repeating. Yeah, pretty simple, right? So these are set up around an inch. I don't know how big your orbit's going to be, so this is a base setup. You're going to have to define your drawings from what we give you, and if you need to do that, you can go into options under annotation. It's the very top one, and under dimensions, and you can edit it. It's in inch decimal here. It's already highlighted what the active one is. So right now my text height is 0.75, so it's 3/4 of an inch. So if I need it larger, this is where I would change it right here, and I did it there. And that would update it for all my objects because they're all following it. So if you look at this annotations properties, I'm clicking on the properties panel here. It's an annotation, and it also has this little panel here that tells us about the leader. It tells us what it says. It also tells us the style. So if you're not sure what the style is, you can just look at the object's properties, and it'll tell you over here what the style is. So I've got those, and this is just, I gotta run it through the process and do it again with the other views. So I'm going right view, and I'm just taking the time to turn the layers off. when I don't need them. It looks like I made this one on the wrong view. Something's up with this one. I might have brought this one in. You know what? It might be from the old one that I need to delete it. That's probably what it is, because they don't line up. So I'll get rid of that. And I'll repeat my analyze point. Those are called sticky options. That means now that whatever I did last time, I had labels on with leaders. I don't have to run through that process again. Delete the old ones. You guys won't have to worry about the old ones on there. You get a fresh start. So now I'm in the left view. And I'm just going down the layers here. Whenever I see the next layer name, I hop to that layer name. And if you don't want to have to just keep right-clicking, you can type in repeat. Even though a command's not repeatable automatically, if you type in repeat and then you run the command, it'll just keep running. Until I hit enter. So let's go to the bottom. The big deal here is just have the points on, because you want to worry about snapping to the wrong object. And then last one's back. All right. So now I've got all my notations done. I'm going to turn that layer off for a second. And I'm going to switch to my extensions, my XYZ extensions, and turn off my notations just so they're not in the way. And take a look at what I've got. Now, to make our extensions, we want to just extend what we've got here. We've already got these objects here, right? So under extended curves, I'm just going to make copies of those crosses. And I don't even have to go into the model to do that technically. I don't have to worry about selecting something by mistake. I can just right-click, because I put things on the right layer. I can go into my point markers there, right-click it and say select objects, and then right-click the extended curves and say copy objects to layer. So now that if I take off my markers, I still have a new copy of those objects on my extended curves layer. That's right there. Okay. It's not messy. I'm not worried about moving stuff. I don't want to get my hands dirty unless I have to. I'm going to take these guys. I group them as a kind of safety measure. I don't know if I can use the extend if it's grouped. I've never tried it, so I'm just going to try it real quick and try doing a dynamic extend. And it looks like it'll still work, so that's fine. I'll leave them grouped. There's no point to ungroup them if it still works. This is where the boundary object kind of comes in. So this one was based on the one I had in the previous model. This is obviously a little bit different. I would say, you know, I want to have something that's a little bit more centered. And it's a real kind of estimate type of thing. So what I'm doing now is I'm just trying to center this visually to kind of see what kind of boundaries I would want my drawing to have. And I can scale it as well. I can scale it down, and I don't think that this one's a perfect cube, so I'm going to just double check. I'm going to, on that boundary object layer, I'm on it right now. I'm going to try and draw a box and see what I'm dealing with. I'm going to turn on my end, snap here, and hold down shift. So it looks like my base is a square. That's good. And instead of typing in something, I'm just going to hit enter to accept the width as my height, and that'll give me a cube. So that's good. It looks like my object was a cube. So I just delete one of those now that I know that for sure. definitely worth checking. And I'm just going to look at it in my other views. Looks like, see on this one, it's not going to work, so I'm going to try and move it down a little bit. This is on the right view. That one's hanging out. On the bottom, on the back, it's starting to look better. I'm going to turn on my splines just to make sure, because those are going to be a little bit wider. It looks like I still could move down a little bit on here. So what are we doing? We're kind of using this cube as like 6 projection planes, and we're trying to see visually how we want to frame our drawing. It's a lot easier to do this in space right now, do it one time, than to do it on trying to align them later 6 times, right? So we want to be smart about it. If it works in here, I can just bring in this cube, and I've got a guide that I can snap them all to later on. So this is pretty good. Maybe I don't think I need to give myself too much extra spaces here, because I want my extensions to go out, but I want my drawing to take up a good amount of space on there. So this is starting to look good. So this is an extra step that's not on the handout, but you can definitely write it in here. We're going to do a make 2D with this, but if I do it right now, they're going to be hidden objects because they're literally inside a box. That's an actual box that I made, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn that into a curve, a box of curves. I'm going to use this silhouette command, and that'll just create a curve outline of that object. So I'm going to stay on that layer, and I'm going to go into curve from objects, silhouette, down here. Surface is the silhouette. I pick my box and I hit enter. It looks the same, but if I hide that box now, I've got a curve outline of the box, and that's not going to bother my drawings, especially because they're orthogonal. So when my drawings are just going to have a little frame like that, and that's all they're going to have. It's going to be out of my way. Okay. I could have also just done 2 make 2D drawings, one of the box and one of that, but that's more than I want to do. I want to get that done out. So I'm going to show it again. So I'm going to unhide. Don't want to delete things in a model this small. There's no real need for it. So I just brought my box back. The reason why we did a box and not that rectangular box before is because we're going to use our box as a boundary for our extensions. Okay, so I'm going to go back on wireframe so I can see my stuff and turn off my splines, and I'm going to extend my curves to the edges of here. So let's go to curve, and I'm going to extend curve. It says select boundary objects, so I picked the box and I hit enter. Excuse me. Select curve to extend. Well, that's when I just start touching the ends of these curves, and each curve has an end on it, so I need to touch both ends of each curve. And that's just, without me having to manually do it, it's just going to stop the curves at the end of that box. Simple, right? You just got to set it up first, that's all. It's more about the setup. Execution gets easy if you set it up. If I got closer, I wouldn't have to go into the object selection. It's just that I'm zoomed out. You just want to make sure you didn't miss any. I got them. I don't see any short ones, so that's a sign. And remember, these are copies. I have these here, and I have these here. That way they're coming in on separate layers, and I can keep them separate. Okay.
You're talking about points, right?
Talking about those little crosses.
The intersections.
Yeah. The points won't come through. Yeah, once we go from Rhino into Illustrator, we're going to be talking about those little crosses are going to be that. So, how are we doing on time?
5:17.
5:17. So, I mean, I think that's the run through and to actually produce the geometry. That's all there is to it. I can answer questions about this specifically, and if people wanna, I don't know, I'll leave it up to Philip to say what else that needs to be said about this. But if anybody has any kind of specific questions on how to do this, then I'd like to kind of clear that out at this time. Your drawings that got out of Illustrator, we can talk about how to do that and how to export them out and to get them in, and to clean them up in Illustrator. But how about anything in terms of this process or anything that needs to be shown or explained or anything like that?
So was everyone sort of able to match the kind of conversation that Mike had with this? Right? Understandably for the ones that haven't opened or worked with Rhino.
Technical problems, but yeah. That's the plan. Yeah.
And then you got the template available, right?
For the Rhino file, yeah. So we can put that on the school network,
So we'll
under
put
the
the
AR201
file
folder.
on the network too. So again, we're trying to minimize the excuses not to get this done, right? But cluster together. Yeah, work together. Friday, just to follow up on this, how to get it out, right, into another environment that is a kind of two-dimensional representation of it, which is the managing of line weights, visual presence, the drawings that you're asked to produce out of this, like the 6 views, right? Anyone figure out what the 6 views are? We spelled it out, right? So it comes out of one model, but you'll present it all in one. Any questions?
Yeah, once he extended the lines, what does that do? Is that doing anything to the actual?
Here. See, he uses the mouse. I can only draw. Please.
I've got them. He's not saying I can't draw.
No, that's
Please
not
don't
what
think
I'm
that.
saying. I don't know how to push buttons either.
I can draw. It's nasty. What color you want?
In red.
It is
We're going. No, it's called gnarly.
It's gnarly. Yeah, nasty sounds bad.
I would say one of the views. Right, in your environment. The final. Guys, come on.
Shut up.
Hey, come on. Sorry. I thought I said something. Am I blinded? No. Okay. You got guidelines. These are the lines essentially. Except the one that's coming at us, we don't see. Right. So every point is going to produce 3. So visually, we'll be able to organize this in space. Right, so that's one thing that might be your top view, and then the next one. It's the result of what you do here. Yeah.
So we got 6 views for the extension lines and the splines, and you have a total of 12 projections by the end, right?
Tell me the math again.
Six.
Six views for those extension lines, and then another 6 for the splines. Are we doing the splines?
No, it's all one thing.
Oh yeah. So, okay. So yeah, the spline will be.
Oh, together.
Yeah, it'll be when we do our drawings, they're going to include the splines, and they're going to have the markers, which are hard to see right now, but they're there as well, the little crosses, and then also your annotations. And they're in there somewhere. Notations, top ones. Turn off the left and the back ones. So your drawing will look, content-wise, it'll have that amount of information in it when it comes out. And we're really not adding too much to it in Illustrator. What we're doing there is defining the line types and the drawing conventions in there. Right. But you can start to see why this is nice to have too, right? Because we can export, you know, when I turn off that surface and I've just got the curve outline, my border set up as well. I don't have to kind of re-edit that either. You definitely could in Illustrator, it's just more work. It's not that you can't do it.
So if we make the bounding box, we make it 10 by 10 to best this other drawing.
Well, how would that work? This model is in actual size, right? Like I don't even know what this is. So what we'll do is we'll talk about Friday how to establish a graphic scale. What we'll have in the, we can include in the template as well is in the Illustrator template is a graphic scale on whatever it is, but it'll be graphic. Meaning I would say there's such a range, and this is a small drawing that there's no real point in having the drawings all at one particular scale or another. It's just as long as we have a visual scale there, then it's about having a clear drawing.
Yeah.
10 by 10 is not a huge image, and this is a pretty big thing. But obviously rounder numbers make life easier. So if you want to start at that point, you can see you can kind of basically start with anything. And the box in the template is a perfect cube. So if you just turn on the gumball and scale it, you just hold down Shift and grab any of these squares, it'll stay a cube. And that way all your projections will have the same frame. It's just a matter of placing it in the right spot, right?
I think there was a note in the first handout that none of the points should get any closer than an inch to the edge. Okay. If it's projected out to the presentation scale, which is a 10 by 10. Right? So that's an approximation because you want to prevent that you end up having a point that's just hanging out right here.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we're trying to keep these annotations up and to the right, to just trying to keep them consistent, but you're going to have situations where you're going to have something like that, right? Yeah. That's part of your drawing, and there's two routes to that. You can fix it in Rhino. So if I go into Rhino and I turn those same control points on, this leader has control points, and I can just move those. It's 1, 2, 3, right? And I can just move the leader, and it'll still connect if I leave that one down there alone.
See,
or I can do it in Illustrator.
Do this very quickly, right? But the leader is shifted based on where it has space.
It's the same process.
I didn't need a gumball.
Good job, Philip.
It's built in.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't know, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't know any better.
No.
It's not drawing. Doesn't know. You know. Just a tool.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Well, but that's a good question. Any other kind of we want to get these questions. Now's the time to ask the questions when we've got a working model in front of us, not in theoretical space in our mind palace at our desk.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I think you talked about it in the beginning, but I don't remember. In this template, did you set the origin point to one of the corners of the box? That's what I was.
No.
So when we put in the point coordinates, is it just where are those going to go?
Well, your model always has an origin point, so all you have to do is just start typing in your coordinates. Doesn't matter, right? Because this
the file has a 0.
Yeah, so that's it.
But then you also move the box.
Yeah, and you move the box to fit it. The box is a product of the points, and this model is centered around those points. The benefit of having the 0 is that you don't have to worry about where the 0 is here. That's kind of the trade-off of doing the work ahead of time. Yeah. So I guess that answers your question in that no, the box is really just a frame that you're kind of moving around. You could honestly do it without the box and just draw a bunch of random lines and go trim them out in Illustrator. It's just a sloppier way to do it, that's all. But you could definitely do it that way. You could get the same drawings out.
Does it matter what order you enter in your sets of X, Y, Z? Not the X, Y, Z values, it's not the set of your 5 set of...
No.
It doesn't matter?
No, it doesn't matter.
See, the sequence.
What order?
one,
The sequence? No.
3, like,
No.
Or you thought X, Y, and Z.
Not X, Y, Z.
No, just the points themselves. No, does not matter.
That
Does
doesn't
not.
matter which, for the way that the spline connects to each.
No.
Well,
the
I
points
think
will
that's
automatically count for
that's a
it.
really good question. I think it's sort of a hypothetical question, right?
No, I don't think it is.
I don't think it.
I think it's a technical one.
Yeah,
Location will
like,
go to
let's
where
say
the points are.
I end up having something like this, right?
So yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah, no, that's a good. It's a both question. It's like half technical, half hypothetical. I see what you're saying. I can tell you the answer to that. Yeah.
One way.
How does it know?
Like, how does it know?
How does it know?
I think it's up to you to know. Like, let's say, that,
By the order.
from 1 to 2, you know the compute. You can connect this in a way that is even this. You see what I mean? There's maybe something for you to keep track of.
So the way that the tool works is that it wants to it always picks the closer point, right? So if you do have, there are instances of it. I'm trying to. It's hard to try. It's always hard to do it on purpose, get one that fails, but it does. You know, when we did coasters in my Rhino class, you know how the roller coaster, they do those loops, and then a lot of times I'll pass the roller coaster through it. A lot of times it wouldn't make the loop. It would jump onto that part because there was a closer point. It gets really complicated. The problem is we don't have enough of those points to get complicated, but it's definitely possible with 3D stuff. And like I don't know how it's going to deal with that, for instance. And if that's not necessarily the order that it was supposed to be, we're only dealing with 5 to 7 points. You can just do it manually as well. And if you want to do it manually, you just, instead of using the curve through points, you use the interpolative curve tool. So if I go to curve, freeform, and I say interpolative points, I can just manually give it the order by picking the points, and it'll run it through there. So if I know that this is 2, that's 3, that's, you know, and then I can close it up there. And that's not going to take that long, you know. So if it looks goofy when you first put it in, it doesn't seem like the natural orbit, then just use the interpolative curve and you can tell it. Good question.